Welcome to the Create a Life You Love podcast, the go-to podcast for people who are called to make a positive impact through the power of coaching. You'll hear encouraging stories from coaches sharing their journeys and their lessons learned along the way, tips from top experts who help coaches thrive in their life and their business, and so much more. So if you're ready to create a business and a life of impact that you love, let's get started. Have you listened to part one of an amazing episode we just wrapped up live a few minutes ago, and it did go long, but it was just so incredibly value packed that we are going to release part one and then part two shortly thereafter. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for joining us on today's episode of the Create a Life You Love podcast. I'm Chantel Cox. I'm an author, speaker, transformation neurocoach, and certified life purpose coach who saves purpose-driven coaches from feeling stuck and frustrated so that you can get off the hamster wheel and make the aligned impact that you're destined for without overwhelm and burnout.
And I'm Gwen White, a quantum human design coach and certified virtual coach. I work with creative, highly sensitive introverts, and I empower them to monetize their passions using the human design system. Shout out to our sponsor before we dive in with Julie. We would love to recognize the Create a Life You Love membership, an active community of passionate, purpose-driven coaches who are up-leveling in the most powerful ways to increase their knowledge, momentum, and impact. For more information and to apply, definitely check out createalifeyoulovecoaching.com/membership today.
Awesome. And we just had the most fun time on one of our monthly membership calls. So that was super fun. I love just getting in the app and chatting, getting things shared. So anyway, so we are no longer using Restream. We are just on Facebook, but please share comments and questions. You'll want to be watching it from the Create a Life You Love community Facebook group, and I will get that link here in a minute, put in the chat in the places I just shared it around Facebook. But we really like to hear from you and interact with you, and so you can ask questions and share comments. This is our last live episode of 2022, and we're not 100% solid on what 2023 will look like. So if you are live, take advantage, say hello in the chat. It's going to be a lot of fun tonight because, and sorry for my voice, but we are so excited to be here today with an absolutely amazing woman. She has been a guest on the Create a Life You Love podcast before. And so please help me welcome motivational speaker and inspiration coach, Julie Eisenmann. Julie has recovered from a tragic past and helps people get through life's heartaches, addictions, and hopelessness. Through the 3-step process, she has been sober and drug-free for over 40 years while keeping her eyes on Jesus and growing in him. Her dominant passion is to validate, comfort, and heal wounded people. When people hear her talk of all of the tragedies she has been through, they realize and believe that they too can get through whatever it is that they are going through. Her goal is to bring hope and laughter through Jesus to over 10 million people by 2028. And so we're so excited you're here with us, Julie, to make a dent in those 10 million people with us tonight. So welcome back to the show. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing really good. You'll have to forgive the hoodie here. When we do these things, we always turn off the background noise, which you reminded me to do. So this is my favorite place to sit. So I had to turn off the heater and because it's so noisy and it's getting kind of chilly in here. So the only thing I didn't do was lock Grace up. So let's hope that she doesn't decide to go crazy while we're chatting here.
Oh, good. Well, just a little background for everybody. Julie and I met each other back in 2019, pre-COVID days, at an in-person conference in Denver that was put on by Pete Vargas. And he teaches authors, coaches, and entrepreneurs how to share their message on in-person and virtual stages. Little did we know how important virtual stages were going to become shortly after that conference, but Julie, you truly have an amazing story, and I'd love for you to share with the audience a bit about your journey of creating a life you love.
Okay. I'll never forget the night in between 8th grade and freshman year. We were all sitting down at the dining room table, my mom, my brother, and my dad, and my mom had told me earlier that week that she was sending me away to boarding school, and because we used to fight 7 times a day. Ever since they adopted me, we would fight 7 times a day, and I couldn't believe that my dad would let me go to boarding school. And um, so I called her out on it that night. And I called her out on it. And my dad looked up from the table and he was shaking his head. He says, I never agreed to that. And I looked at her and I saw the rage go up in her face. I saw her fist clench her knife and her fork as they came crashing down onto the dining room table. I jumped up, ran out, hopped on my 10-speed bike and went racing down the alley. No more beatings, no more arguing, no more fighting, no more hearing I'm not good enough, no more hearing that I'll never amount to anything and I'll be fat for the rest of my life. No more, it's everything in that house being my fault. I'm out of here. And just at that moment, I saw this red car out of the corner of my eye coming down the street. And I had it timed perfectly so that I would be right in front of his grill by the time I got to the mouth of the alley. And I'd be right there. And I poured it on. And just at the last second, when I went past the hedges and the tree, I crammed on the brakes. And I was like, I'm not going to allow her to kill me. I'm going to get her. And you don't stand up to my mom and get away with it. She'll beat you down even harder. By the time I was 19 years old, I had already been mentally, emotionally, and physically abused by her on almost a daily basis. I had been raped. I had been sexually abused. I had missed death 3 times. I thought I was gay. I was an alcoholic and drug abuser and didn't know it. Uh, I was a mess by the time I was 19 and I wanted out. The mental and emotional pain was so deep and so heavy. And I know some people can identify with that, you know. I wanted out. Today, I'm happy. I'm unconditionally loved. I have good friends. I have people that I can trust. I have successfully opened 4 small businesses. I know grace. Life is good. I have a life worth living, and I believe everybody has a life worth living too. I've been down so many times. I was like my second or third. By the time I was 19, it was about my second or third brush with suicide. I know what it's like to be. I know what it's like to be angry enough to kill. And we'll talk a little bit about that. I thought about that this morning when I got up too. Uh, it was December 20th. Was a big milestone, and we'll talk about that later. But I have. It's just life is good. You know, I get out and help people. I have fun. If you're not going to have fun, why do it? You know. What else? I know I'm missing some stuff, but that's about it.
It's amazing.
It is. So when I turned 19, I was at college. It was at the end of towards the end of my heavy drinking, and I had moved out of my parents' house at the last end of the school year. I had moved out. I had gone out with friends 4th of July, flew out of a Jeep head first when they took the turn too fast, and I hit an oak tree and cracked my head open and almost died. And my dad wanted me to wear a football helmet to school, college. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think so. I'm not showing up at college wearing a football helmet on my head for the whole time. Yeah, ain't happening. But I wanted out. After that episode between 8th grade and freshman year, she decided that the family should go to family counseling because everything in the house was my fault. So it was only me, my dad, and her. John didn't go because he's the Eagle Scout. She was the apple of his eye. So Dad and I are drug off to family counseling, and the shrink saw her 3 times and my dad together, and then saw me 3 times separate. And on the 3rd one, he says, well, I have good news and I have bad news. He said, the bad news is that was speaking with your parents, and you know, your mom needs some help and she doesn't want any, so she's not coming to counseling anymore. Basically said she was nuts, which I kind of sensed. And he said, but the good news is you can stay with me. And if you want to receive counseling, then you can come to counseling and everything. And I'll help you, you know, get through things. And I said, okay. And the short of what he told me was that he was trying to make me feel better. And he said, your mom's mother died when she was 3 or 4 years old. And she had a lot of brothers and sisters. And my grandparents aren't really my grandparents. They are her aunt and uncle. And her aunt and uncle are the ones that adopted her because they hadn't had any kids yet. And the rest of her family, I think there was 9 or 10 kids, they got spread out all over the place. And I could never understand why she always got invitations for a family reunion in Ohio, and she would never talk about it. So he said that that was really hurtful for her. It was real painful when her mother died and she went over to her aunt and uncles. And her dad was an abuser, which is why she in turn abused me. But he tried to help me feel better, and he says, you know, what your mom's doing to you is not right. And I really didn't know any different. Um, he said it was illegal, and he said that she couldn't have kids, so they were going to adopt, and they adopted my brother first. He's 3 years older than I am, because she was afraid that a little girl would steal my father's love away from her. And so she didn't want it. Yeah, Gwen just got it. She didn't want it. So when my counselors all over the years, I've been in and out of counseling, they said that I knew when they put her in my arms that she didn't want me. I mean, it was on from the very beginning. And so I stayed in counseling with him. And when I got to college, when we were in counseling, we do group counseling, there'd be like 6 people, and someone say, yeah, my dad's an alcoholic. Julie, you can relate to that. Yeah, I was raped. Yeah, Julie, you can relate to that. Oh, everything, and I was at the point where I'm like, I have everybody's, I've had enough. Thank you. That's as much fun as I want to have. But when I got to college, my drinking just went off. I thought that I was gay. I came out of the closet. I got a girlfriend. Um, I went back to Illinois for spring break, which was kind of scary because I moved out of my parents' house because my dad almost killed me one night when I was trying to get away from my mom. And they broke down the door in my room. So I went out on the roof. And when he went to either grab me or hit me while he was drunk, while she was calling the cops, I went to dodge his hands and almost fell off the ledge of the window. So I slid down the gutter and went over to my boss's house and stayed at her place until I got in a car accident. And then 3 weeks later, I went to college. So it was pretty hard. I hated life. Um, I didn't like most people. I felt the world was really stunk really bad, that the bad guys were out to get the good guys, and there was way more bad guys than there were good guys. I had that deep, dark, emotional, and mental pain. And they said that basically I was using the drugs and alcohol to anesthetize that pain. And it kind of kept me alive until my life transformed. Um, my girlfriend had taken off. President Reagan had gotten shot. One of the girls in the dorm said she was sorry that they missed that he was still alive. I couldn't believe that. I was seeing 2 shrinks at the time, one at the college and one in town. And the guy in college was dealing with the past. The gal in town was dealing with the current because I was too embarrassed to tell him that I thought I was gay. And I wanted out. It was my birthday the day after he got shot. I didn't get any birthday presents from home, and I just wanted out. And so I went out, the Chicagoan that I am, in La Plata Canyon, took my tent at the end of March in Colorado in snow to get away from it all. And I got the tent up, started a fire with all the sticks, and I had pot with me, but I didn't have any beer. And I couldn't understand why the fire kept going out. Well, duh, if you like sticks and everything on top of snow, it's going to go out. So I went to sleep and tried to, and then I heard somebody walking around my tent, and that really scared me. And I'm like, I'm not getting raped again. I do not want to go out like this. I just don't. And so I got up after they left, and I found a guy, called my up the road. I had to walk up the roads a bit. My friends at college picked me up, took me back to campus, and we got up the next morning. And my friend Smitty came with us, who's Native American. We went to go get my stuff, and they were like, "What are you going to do?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I don't want to be here. I'm done. I don't want to be here." I had gone out the day before to the side of the mountain where I was at in college, and I really hoped and had believed that there is a God, but I didn't know who he was. And I didn't know who was telling the truth. I was studying Buddhism and Hinduism in my Japanese class on art and history and everything, and gone to different churches, denominations, Christians, and I didn't know, but I knew that there had to be a God, That was my hope growing up, was there has to be somebody that will not lie to you, deceive you, hurt you. That's true blue. And I went out on the side of the mountain and I said, God, take me. And I was serious. Nothing. I waited. There was no bolt of lightning. There was no strong urge to jump. There was no big gust of wind that blew me off the side. And I just walked away. It was like, well, you don't care either, you know? And so Smitty came out with me to get my stuff. And she looked at me and she had gone kind of pale white and her jaw was open. She said, Julie, you thought that was a guy walking around your tent last night? And I go, yeah, I heard him. You sure about that? I'm like, yeah. She said, come on over here. Show me these huge footprints. She said, that was a bear. And I was like, well, okay. And so anyway, I went into the hospital. The counselor got me to go to the hospital for 2-3 days and chill out. The next weekend, so that was, till 19. What happened was the next weekend, my girlfriend called from Denver, and I hadn't heard from her in weeks, and I had already come out of the closet, and I was like, I believe this is true and everything, and she had taken off, and she called, and I'm like, where are you? She said, I'm in Denver, and I'm like, okay. I'm like, when are you coming home? And she's like, I'm not. I'm like, what do you mean? I love you. You're my girlfriend. We're together. Why? Come back, come back. And she's like, no, I can't. And she goes, and I'm like, why not? She said, I found Jesus. I'm like, that's nice. Come back. I love you. You're my girlfriend. And she said, I can't do that. I found Jesus. And I'm like, fine, bring him too. I wanted to know who he was. I wanted to know what he had that I didn't have, and the guy that stole my girlfriend. So she tried to explain, what she did in salvation and everything, and another lady did. And they said, why don't you talk to Valerie there where you're going to college? And she's an ex heroin addict, Hell's Angel biker chick, and you can talk to her and she can explain what it's all about. And I'm like, cool, my kind of girl. All right. So that week we got together at the Denny's restaurant. I'll never forget it. And I'm like, all right, what's Sherry up to? What is this? She found Jesus thing, what's going on? And she told me about her story and how that she was looking for God, and she was a heroin addict and riding with a really pretty tough group and everything. And so she told me that she didn't understand the Bible until she gave her life to the Lord and got saved. And I'm like, okay, and I was listening to her, and she said that she goes to church and she listens to people preach, and then she writes down notes and takes scriptures down, and then she goes home and she brings the scriptures up herself, and she either agrees with it, disagrees with it, or puts it on a shelf for stuff she doesn't understand or is not sure about. So I asked her, I said, I've been looking for God and everything, but how do you know who's the real one? There's all these gods out here, I mean, I was heading towards Buddhism. I mean, who doesn't like a fat, happy, bald guy, right? I think that's, I think that's pretty cool for a God, I like that. But then I learned that in Hinduism, Buddhism, that of reincarnation, that you got to keep coming back until you get it right. And I'm like, no, that ain't happening. I am a one-trip chick. I am not coming back to this hellhole once I'm gone. No way. So I asked Valerie about that. I said, in Christianity and what you're doing, do you have to come back as a reincarnation? Do you have to come back here? And she said, no. I said, sign me up. So she said, well, why don't you come to church on Sunday? So I did. And I don't remember everything that was said, but I do remember that they asked if anybody, wanted to be loved, wanted to be born again, go to heaven, and to come up to the front. And I was like, everything inside of me was like, I wanted to go, but I was too afraid to go. And I wanted to go and I wanted to go. It seemed like forever. I finally ran up there and I did. I confessed that Jesus was born, which is this Sunday, give or take, that he was raised, that he was crucified, raised for the dead, and sitting at the right hand of the Father, that God gave him so that we would have forgiveness for sins. And I repented for my sins because I knew I'd screwed up. I mean, just because I was a victim during the whole time does not mean that I wasn't the perpetrator either. That's another time for other stories, but I had done a lot of dumb, bad things. And so I repented for it. And there was just something different. There was a change. They asked me if I wanted to speak in a different language and get baptized in the Holy Spirit. And I was like, sure, okay, let's do it. And that was a trip. That was powerful. And later on, about 4 months later, I was sitting in front of the TV. I was watching the PTL club at my parents' house, and it's Jim and Tammy Faye Baker, and she was talking at the end, praying for everybody, and she's crying, and the mascara's going down her cheeks, and she's like, "So and so's getting, somebody's getting healed of this, somebody's getting healed of that, somebody's getting healed of this, someone's getting healed of that." And she said, "Someone's ears are opening, someone's getting their hearing back. Your hearing's being restored." She said, "Your ears are opening up right now." Bam, my right ear opened up, which is the one that I bled out of when I had gotten tossed out of the Jeep and had lost all of my hearing. They said at best I'd get 40% back. And I was like, wow, this is powerful. This is some serious stuff. This is pretty good, you know? And that kind of set it in stone for me, was that, he's real. It's real powerful. And that's really where some of my hope started to come in. I had screwed up after that. And when I got sober almost a year later, I had just turned 20 years old. And I had met a family when we were going to church in Denver, and she had been in Al-Anon for 9 years, I think, and her husband had been in AA for about 7 years. And he talked to me. He said, "Do you think you're an alcoholic?" And I'm like, "No, I party. My dad's the alcoholic. He drinks 7 to 10 double martinis every night." And he just kind of laughed, and he said, "Well," he goes, "I'm an alcoholic and I only drink beer." And I was like, "Lightweight?" And I'm like, "Yeah, so how you're an alcoholic?" And he goes, "Well, it doesn't mean how much you drink, when you drink, or what you drink." He said, "It's what happens when you drink." He said, "Donna has been in Al-Anon. She's not an alcoholic. She'll drink a glass and a half of wine, and her body will start to get that buzz on, and her body will scream, 'Stop.'" And I'm like, dang, where was I when she was drinking? That's free booze, man. I can finish that. And he looked at me and he giggled, and he said, when I have 1 or 2 beers, he said, my body doesn't say stop and I start to get that buzz on. He says, my body screams more. And I was just like going, okay. And he said, can you go to a bar for 30 days and have just 1 drink? And I'm like, why? And he goes, can you do it? And I said, for 30 days, go to a bar for 30 days. Every time I go in, I only have 1 drink. He goes, yeah. I go, okay, I can do it for 30 days. He said, can you do it for 60? I'm like, 60 for 2 months? And I'm like, yeah. And I had tried doing controlled drinking during that year because I had messed up, backslid, whatever you want to call it, and I got pregnant. I used to deal drugs with. Well, I was never romantically involved with, but once we started getting high and drinking and everything, things happen. And I tried doing controlled drinking because I didn't want to hurt the baby, and I couldn't do it. I'd go out, have a beer, have some waters. I had the whole plan: have another beer, have some waters, mix it. I'd wind up getting drunk every time. It was like 4 or 5 times towards the end of my pregnancy. And I was like, 2 months. I'm like, okay. He says, can you do it for 6? And I'm like, 6 months? Yeah. He goes, can you do it for a year? I'm like, now you're getting personal. And I'm like, a year? And I knew. I was like, no way. And I'm like, so what do you do? And he said, so you admit defeat. He said, the first 3 steps in a 12-step program that I got involved in, he said, I can't stop drinking on my own, which is surrender to God. The second is, I think I can't stop drinking on my own. I think he can help me stop drinking on my own. And then the third is, I think I'll let him. And that was really hard. I thought that I had screwed up again. Once I'd been given that golden ticket of getting saved and everything, that God was just going to kill me, that he was so mad at me, because that's what my mom had done. If you screw up like that, you're going to get beat bad. And I'm like, I am dead. And so when I was listening to people around the rooms, and by the way, I was really ticked off at my first 12-step meeting because I thought it was going to be a bunch of old guys sitting around in a church basement smoking cigarettes and talking about how Joe used to serve old Harry at the bar and how they used to hop on the cars during the Depression, the hobos and all that. That was about what it was. It was a bunch of old men that knew each other, smoky basement. There was one lady there, one old lady, and she had enough makeup on her, caked on her face. It was about 2 inches. And I was like, oh my God. And you're telling me I got to go to the rest of this crap for the rest of my life? I'm like, God, you are not funny. I don't think I like this. This is not funny. And, but their eyes were clear, and I hadn't seen clear eyes in a long time. And there was something there. They were happy and they had joy. And I was like, okay, so they asked if anybody was there at that meeting, their first, second, or third meeting after their last drink. Raise your hand. And so these people, I was looking around, people were raising their hands, and Bob promptly shoved his elbow in my ribs, and my hand shot up in the air. And I said, "Hi, I'm Julie. I'm just visiting." And I'm still visiting. It's been over 40 years. And they told me in those rooms, God can be a group of drunks. And God can be whatever, you need it to be. And I was terrified. And they said that God is like DOG backwards. DOG is God backwards. And they said, think of God this way. I'm like, he's going to kill me, man. I'm dead. There's no way that I can go back. He's going to kill me. I've screwed up so bad. After getting the golden ticket, and they were like, Julie, you have a dog? And I'm like, yeah. And they said, when you come home, the dog is so happy to see you. Their tails wagging, and they're like, Mom, I'm so glad to see you. I've missed you. I thought about you all day. And I'm sitting there going, I just yelled at the cashier, and you're happy about me? I just did something to somebody and told them to, take a hike. And you love me? And they're like, yeah, DOG is GOD backwards. It's unconditional love. And I was just like, wow, and then you get mad and you yell at the dog, and you're like, oh man, I'm so sorry I yelled at you. Grace. They extend grace to us. They forget all about it. They're like, I don't care, I love you. And that was the relationship. That was how I had to learn over again about God. And that was DOG, no matter what. So that was a big turning point for me. I had to trust him. And it's hard because when you've been lied to all your life and you've been screwed over and betrayed so many times, it's really hard to trust. And I've been learning, and I'm still learning, because I am so not perfect. And that's the thing, when you get born again, it's not like the fairy godmother who waves her wand and all the pixie dust comes down and you're perfect, like Cinderella. It's it's not that way. It's a whole tons of wounded people that are still learning how to deal with life on life's terms with the help of the God of our understanding. And, perfect love casts out all fear. And when I don't feel in my heart and in my head that God really does unconditionally love me, I get fearful.
It's such a powerful, powerful testimony, Julie. And I know we touched base a little bit before we went live, and you were sharing that you were a little nervous because it'd been a little while since you'd shared your story. So I just want to let you know, in the chat live right now, we have Christine Guzman saying, very inspiring, Julie, with a heart emoji, and Janine Lesback, I need to connect with you one-on-one and could actually talk to you. But she says, I've always thought that about Buddha too. And then she says, God is dog spelled backwards, nothing but unconditional love. That's so beautifully expressed. So just
Yeah.
absolutely powerful, powerful story. And then I know there's even more, but to go through the snapshot of things that you just shared with us, and to be sitting where you are now, having healed through some of that and turning that tragedy into triumph for yourself, is just amazing. But then to take it a step further and now dedicate yourself to helping others turn their tragedy into triumph is just, yeah, I just want to hug you.
And I would hug you right back.
I
And it'd
know.
be a good hug. Left side to left side, because that's where the hearts join.
Mm,
I want to end on that hug.
yeah.
All right, you got it. So what got me through where I went from there was that I got into Christian counseling, went through some deliverance. That terrified me because I asked Pauline, I was like, what do you mean deliverance? You mean like that chick in the movie that her head spun around and spewed out the pee stuff? And she was like, no, it's not like that. I'm like, oh, okay, well, yeah, I'll try it, and me and Sherry and I, we were no longer gay. We were new creatures in Christ, and everything was gonna be perfect. We were gonna quit chewing tobacco, we were gonna quit drinking, drugging, smoking, swearing. We were gonna start wearing dresses and skirts and wear makeup and pluck our eyebrows and everything. And about a month and a half later, we were in Denver, and we went out to have a couple beers before the night we were to get baptized in full water at the deliverance ministry. And yeah, I didn't know that I had a problem. That was before I got sober. And we went out to have a couple beers. It wound up to be about a case. And we were so drunk when we got back to the house, we couldn't make it down into the house and down the stairs. So we tried sleeping on the trampoline, which was the worst idea in the world. Because if someone coughs or someone pukes, the whole thing starts bouncing and it makes you more seasick and you just puke more. And you're pulling the springs apart so you can stick your head through them. And, there was, when you woke up in the morning, I can only imagine what we looked like. The guy on Back to the Future with the hair all pulled out and everything and teased and hair still in the springs and, vomit all over the ground and everything. And we were like, oh boy, we really blew it this time, and we got to the deliverance ministry and Rexa came out. She's a little black lady and word had already gotten to there that what we had done. And she came flying out of the house and she's like yelling at us, I heard what you did last night. You expect to come in here and get baptized and blah, 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 and everything. And we're just, man, hangovers, I rarely had them because I would just get up and drink what I had the night before and I would just stay drunk. So, if you cut me when I was bleeding, I probably would have, lit on fire because I just stayed drunk. But we had a huge hangover and she's yelling and everything. And she goes, does that hurt? Are you hurting? I'm like, oh yeah, I'm hurting bad. She goes, good. And she said, you should be hurt. Did you apologize yet? Did you repent for what you two did last night? Yes, ma'am. We repented. I'm sorry. I don't know. We just went out to have a couple beers to celebrate and everything. And she goes, okay. She says, well, I believe you. And she just looked at us. She goes, you're really hurting. And I was just like, man, I felt like crap. And we did get baptized. It was in a horse trough of cold water. And they said we came out of that trough glowing. Hangover was gone, the whole 9 yards. And I'm like, oh, now I know why those guys in Chicago go jumping in the ice in the Lake Michigan on the first, Oh my God. But yeah, got baptized in full water and everything. And then just kept on with counseling. Sometimes it was Christian. I went on with, the 12-step group. I stopped going to church after all the biggies started getting caught up and doing all the stuff they weren't supposed to. Jim Baker went to jail. There was a whole bunch of them at the time. And I'm like, and my friends were like, stick with the program. You're no use to God if you're drunk or high, so it's been over 40 years now that I have not had any mind altering chemicals or any drinking. I quit cigarette smoking. I quit gambling. I quit sex, all that other kind of stuff that you can, trade off. And, I was kind of in and out of counseling. I still thought that I went back to thinking that I was gay again and came out of the closet again. And during that time, I met a guy that I was at 12-step meetings with. We were bowling and we'd go out and everything, we'd talk. And he was a Vietnam veteran and I was really interested in Vietnam veterans. And so one night he asked me to go to a movie or something that weekend. And I went to the bathroom and I was like going, I think this guy wants to date me. I don't think he wants to be friends. And I'm like, doesn't he know that I'm gay? And so I was like, you got to tell him, you got to be honest. And so I went back out and I told him, I said, it seems like that you want to go out on a date. And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, well, I think you ought to know that the person I was with last is a woman. I'm a lesbian. And he goes, yeah. And I'm like, so why do you want to date me? And he says, well, won't you give me a shot? And I'm like, oh man. And so I'm like, thought about it. And I'm like, okay, here's the deal. If you want to consider it and call it a date, fine. But we are not going to hold hands in public. I worked too hard to get in the lesbian community and you are not going to blow it for me. Okay. So that's the deal. So we started going out. I know I can't tell my story. This is my life. It's funny. And the Bible does say that those of us who laugh a lot are the ones that live longer. So, okay, that's good. My little niece, my adopted grandnieces and nephews were the ones that said that. So anyway, so yeah, he's like, okay, we're gonna date. Okay, fine. Well, we started it with 8 other people. We started a Vietnam veterans organization back in Illinois, and it was Vietnam veterans families helping Vietnam veterans families. And so we took what we learned from the 12-step group and started men's rap group with the guys. And man, that we were together for 10 years, all of the group from Vietnam. And it was just the best time ever. It was just, watching, it was after the welcome home parade in New York and then the big one in Chicago. And so guys were starting to come out of their shells and they were starting to let the walls down and they were starting to go, okay, yeah, it is a welcome home. Wow. Okay. Oh, I got a lot of problems. Oh, you're having problems too. Oh, let's deal with them. Let's go to the VA. Let's get into the counseling. Let's go get tested for Agent Orange and everything. And so we had just this great group. We had a good time. We went camping a lot together. And so we started this group and everything. And someone asked him one night, he goes, yeah, I asked her once, she's turned me down 1,000 times. And I'm like, what did you ask me that I turned you down 1,000 times? He said, if you marry me. I was like, you never asked. And he goes, will you marry me? And I was like, oh man, you just walked right into that. And my whole prayer during the time that we were dating, we were hanging out and having a good time and everything. I was praying to God and I was like, God, I think I know what you're doing and I don't think I like it. God, I think I know what you're doing and I don't think I like it. And I was taking him around to a lot of different friends and fleecing God with the feedback from them and everything. And so I said, well, I'll have to think about it. And about 3 or 4 months later, I woke up and I'm like, I don't want to be his business partner and everything. I said, I want to be his wife. And I was like, what? Where'd that come from? I rebuke you in the name of Jesus. And I was like, calm down. There's a war that was going on, the conversation in my head. And I was just like, I really do. I want to be his wife. And I'm like, okay. So I woke him up and I said, you remember what when you asked me if I'd marry you? And I said, I have to think about it. He goes, yeah. I says, okay, I want to marry you. So he was all happy and everything. And so we did. We got married May 28th, 1988. And it was a big wedding. We had just a ton of people there. And he has 2 daughters. They were 7 and 10 when I first met him when we were dating. And those are the best. That's the best thing that ever came out of that marriage, or what I thought was a marriage. And so anyway, we stayed together for that long. About 9 years into the marriage, I quit smoking. He wanted out. I had at times treated him like my mother had treated me. I quit smoking, and I think that he had started drinking again, and I think he had slept with my sister-in-law, and he filed for divorce. And we had already gone bankrupt, so we had just cleared bankruptcy. And when he filed for divorce, I was looking at being out of the house at Christmas time in $10,000 in debt with 2 big dogs and no place to go in Chicago area. And my world was rocked. I didn't know that you could be sober and codependent too. By that time, I had 17 years of sobriety. We added that into our vows, that we wouldn't drink and we would follow God's will. A bunch of my parents' friends, old friends, they coughed when we promised to stay sober. They were, you could hear it in the church. It was pretty funny. And so anyway, I was devastated, and I truly made that commitment. I thought it was what God wanted me to do, was to marry him. And there was no way that I was gonna divorce, because you're not supposed to get divorced. And I made that commitment of in sickness and in health. And I had come to find out through counseling that he was a narcissist. He lied so much. I mean, and I had kind of seen it in the beginning, and a lot of that was coming out. And I was just devastated. And everything that happened to me that they said would happen to me if I drank was happening, and I didn't have the pleasure of having a drink and getting wasted. And I was a mess. I was a wreck. I got back into counseling. I wanted out again. I really wanted out. And the counselor at the VA, because I was married, I could go. She said, why are you here? And I said, because I want out. And she said, okay. And she said, are you suicidal? You want to commit suicide? And I said, I just want out. I said, I can't go out. I cry all the time. I was in an extreme amount of pain, mentally and emotionally. I felt like a failure again. We had already gone bankrupt. Now he was suing me for divorce. And, hindsight's 2020. I don't really blame him, because I had gotten mean to him a couple of times. It was terrible. And I said, this is why I'm here. I said, I'm afraid of heights. And I'm standing in the window in a third-story building, and I'm not afraid to step out. And I said, that's what scares me. And she said, okay. And she said, well, she says, I think I can help. And I'm like, look, I've been released for counseling after my 3rd year of sobriety. Why? Why do I, I don't want to do this again. I don't want, I want to be done. I don't want to go through this anymore. And she says, well, I think I have a technique that can help you and everything. So I'm like, okay. And I said, And she told me her story. That's why I like her, because she broke the rules. And she said, well, she says, I've been where you're at, and I want to commit suicide too. And she goes, but my life is good. And I said, really? I said, that you are still here? And she said, why do you ask? And I said, because I think a lot of you shrinks were suicidal at one point and you decided to stick around and you're miserable, and misery loves company. So you want us to stick around too. And she kind of giggled and she put her head back like this and she thought about it and she goes, yeah, I've got some coworkers, some, people in our industry that I would agree with that. And she said, but for me, she goes, yeah, I really am. Life is good. And I'm just like going, okay.
All right. I hope that you enjoyed part one. Part two will be coming out shortly. So just, yeah, stay tuned and enjoy the journey. Thank you for listening to the Create a Life You Love podcast. We would love to hear from you about your biggest takeaways. Share them with us on Facebook or Instagram at Create a Life You Love Coaching. If you love this episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It's very much appreciated. If you're ready to build aligned and sustainable momentum without overwhelm and burnout, we invite you to apply for the Create a Life You Love membership on our website, createalifeyoulovecoaching.com/membership. That's it for now. Enjoy the journey.